This is Prime Sports Hockey on Prime Sports Network as we have reached the final four of the Stanley Cup playoffs for 2020. So, Jan, been a couple of weeks. We didn't have the opportunity because of the weird scheduling in these specific COVID playoffs to do a show before the next round began. So we kind of skipped on through. We posted our futures picks, though, and we'll post them up again today as we will this show. But we're into the final four now. And yeah, that's the one thing that's definitely a takeaway, no question, is the scheduling. And you know what I say to that, though, is that the players themselves can only blame, they can blame the, look in the mirror. You want to complain about the schedule. You're the reason. You wanted to take a day off for a convicted felon, somebody who is sexually assaults a woman. You want to take the day off of that guy. By all means, that's what you did. And then the whole schedule winds up getting screwed up. You have to have no rest between a game 6 and a game 7, which is just stupid. But like I said, it's their own fault.
Well, I don't think anyone complained necessarily about the schedule too much.
They couldn't complain because they know whose fault it was.
I didn't. Again, I'm not going to discuss politics, so I understood why they took off. We can discuss that separately, but I understood the rationale for it. Some similar to what the other leagues did. The fact that they were in the bubble clearly made things obviously a lot easier, right? Because if you were normally having a regular series in a regular time frame, you would have been traveling from city to city between game 6 and game 7. So because everything was in the bubble, granted, from a physical perspective, it didn't help. But I don't think any of the teams that lost were impacted by the fact that they played on back-to-back days, in my opinion, right? So I thought it was interesting that the stat that I saw that was kind of very interesting was that all the teams that came back from 3-1, ironically, to make a game 7, none of them advanced into the next round. I mean, that's kind of, we'd always talk about, teams that are up 3-1 usually end up winning a series, and always the focus is, well, they'll win game 5 or they'll win game 6. This year, ironically enough, it was game 7 that did all three teams that came back from the 3-1 deficits. None of them ended up advancing to the conference finals.
And so why do you think that was?
I just think in general, the team that's the better team should end up winning. Look, I know you're a Vancouver fan, but after what you saw out of your team, unfortunately, game 7, it's kind of hard not to say that Vegas was the better team. I think
Vegas was clearly a better team than Vancouver, right. But to think that they weren't worn down with not having an extra day off compared to a bigger and faster team, I mean, look, they were not the better team.
Thatcher Demko was the reason why you guys won game 5 and 6 anyway. And he was brilliant in game 7 till only a couple of minutes left, and he gave up literally the one goal. And we can talk about that because clearly your team's going to have some interesting decisions to make in this offseason vis-a-vis Jacob Markstrom and his new potential contract and Thatcher Demko, and also evaluating for the expansion. I think the Islanders, Philly, I think we all thought that the Islanders were overall a better team going into that round, in my opinion. I thought the Islanders were going to win. I thought they'd win in 7. Didn't necessarily know they'd end up losing a 3-1 lead with a pair of overtime losses. And then Colorado, Dallas. Look, Colorado just had too many guys who were hurt. That's really what did him in. You had Philippe Grubauer. You had Pavel Francouz. You had Gabriel Landeskog. You had Eric Johnson. You had Matt Calvert. Obviously, Landeskog got hurt, game 6, and we all thought he might be back game 7, so that was a huge loss. Johnson, I don't think, was coming back, but that materially impacted them on the blue line, especially on the penalty kill, and they were on their third goalie. I don't think any of us would have said Michael Hutchinson would be the guy to potentially lead them to the conference finals.
No, which didn't happen because it's not supposed to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I agree. And that's the reason why I still like Vegas. I think it's one of the, every matchups happen, and Vegas would have won 4-1 or 4-2 had Demko not played historical hockey in net. It took historical numbers by Thatcher Demko to push Vegas till it was tied in game 7 with 7 minutes to go, 0-0. Yeah, so I don't look at that as, Vegas, I don't know about them. No, that's just what happens. It's hockey, and this is why I say that was the difference. Everybody could say, and I completely agree with people who want to say St. Louis and they weren't the same. They didn't need it. They weren't trying as hard, and they had their cup, and it was a weird offseason. I completely agree with all that, but what really killed them was the goaltending. They didn't get any goaltending like they got from Binnington last year, who played the way Demko played in those 3 games the entire second half of the season.
With a better team around him, right? And
Yes.
the interesting part was there was a lot of chatter. I think John Shannon from Sportsnet, I heard from others, is that there was a lot of chatter that people thought that teams that were down 3-1 would have basically punted, right? That they would have just
Yeah,
thrown in the
sure.
towel and they would have basically said, I'm in the bubble. I want to go home. Well, as we saw, that clearly was not the case because we got 3 game sevens, all 3 teams down 3-1 in them. And those 3 teams came back to force a game 7. So the rhetoric or the narrative, oh, guys are in the bubble, they just want to go home, they're tired of being there. I kind of think that one was proven to be not 100% accurate.
Yeah, I don't know. See, sports writers, one of these days they're going to realize that you can't generalize hockey players. You can't generalize the sport because sports in general with hockey players because they're a completely different breed. And they don't just easily go away because it's a crazy off season. I need to go home and so forth and so on. So, but look, the fact is we're not surprised about how it all ended up because, as you said, the Islanders were probably better than Philly, Vegas was better than Vancouver, and Colorado had the injuries and a goalie who had no right being on the ice at the time that Dallas beat him. So we take a look at let's first, before we move on to the final 4, let's go with the teams that lost. Philly. What really killed Philly more than anything was one of the major things the fact that somebody like Claude Giroux can't score goals in the postseason?
There you go. That was a big one. Claude Giroux had a horrific series, in my opinion. Travis Konechny didn't score in this series. Sean Couturier got hurt. Defensively, Shane Gostisbehere, that those 2 years left on his contract after this year is an albatross around their neck. Defensively, Magnus Kanan wore down a little bit. I mean, Philippe Myers had a good series. Provorov just was brilliant, right? Sanheim wasn't bad, but they just didn't get the scoring up front. The guys who you would expect to produce, especially Giroux and Konechny and Couturier and James Van Riemsdyk, none of those guys really produced at all in this series. And that was, in essence, really what the difference maker was. They just didn't get enough offense. Now, granted, part of that is the Islanders' style of play. And we'll see a lot of that against Tampa, where they kind of give you the outside and don't then clog up the middle and restrict you from scoring. And kind of when they get a lead, try to clamp down even more. But we just did not get enough from the big names in Philly. Almost all of them to a man just did not have a good series against the Islanders.
All right. And as far as Boston, I don't think you could just say, well, Rask wasn't there and they had no chance. That wasn't the reason. But what was the issue with Boston? And yeah, they were playing with their backup goalie, so that's definitely part of it. But that wasn't the main reason. So what else? What was the issues with Boston?
I mean, Halak, you mentioned, is one of them. Clearly, you had the top line. I thought Tampa Bay with Hedman back did a fairly decent job on Boston's top line. Boston did get scoring. Charlie Coyle had a pretty decent series, but you look at their third and fourth lines, and their third line is really Coyle, but the rest of them didn't particularly do much offensively. Krejci had a decent series. Pasternak was hurt a little bit. He missed the game. Marchand had a pretty good series. Bergeron, but as a whole, what you expect to get out of that top line in Boston, you didn't get out of it. And then when the second line and third lines couldn't necessarily make up the difference in terms of the scoring output, that to me was the major difference. And Tampa, in my opinion, overall is probably just a better squad.
Okay. Then in the West, like you talked about, Colorado, we understand the injuries. For Vancouver, I tell you right now, I already know what I think is going to happen if Jim Benning is smart, and that is what took place. Even though they lost, was, I think, the best thing that could ever happen to Jim Benning in these negotiations. Jim Benning has got to let Markstrom go. That's it. Demko's number 1 goalie. And in today's day of salary cap constraints, you have to make these tough decisions. It's not that they want to let Markstrom go, but Demko's just proved himself. He's a number 1 goalie right now. And he's 5 years younger, 4 years younger. So you have to let Markstrom go. And maybe by doing that, you can use that money to hold on to Toffoli, and you won't have to trade Brock Besser. And maybe you could also hold on to Tanev.
Well, you guys need one more thing substantially, and you know what that is. You
Well,
desperately need help
that's
on your blue line.
but that's
You
that's
need
the
help on your blue
youth
line.
because they're not going to
Well, you
trade
need
for
no,
anybody. They're
but
not going to sign
Drew,
anyone.
I don't be surprised if they sign somebody. I do honestly think they're going to take the savings from Markstrom if they go that route. And granted, all the other guys they have to bring back, you cannot win with that blue line. Quinn Hughes is an otherworldly talent. There is a major drop off to other guys, and you don't have enough guys in your pipeline to make up the difference. I mean, Tanev had a good series. I don't think Myers had a particularly great series. But when you get beyond that, it's spit and bailing water, in my opinion. Julevi, I think, is a guy for the future, but you guys need more guys on that blue line. And if there's a decent, you know, second pairing guy that's out there in free agency, and don't be surprised if they go after Torrey Krug, because Krug is a guy who would materially upgrade your blue line, and is a guy who can play the other power play point on the
How
second
old is
unit,
he?
which is sub. It's 29.
Okay. Yeah, that's about what they
29.
need. They need someone that.
They you desperately need a guy on your blue line,
Well,
in my
look,
opinion. You look even
and I agree.
Pedersen and Besser and Horvat and Pearson and Toffoli up front. I think you're okay, especially Pedersen. You got to save money. I know for him also for his next contract.
I don't think
But
they can
you guys
afford it.
desperately need help on your blue line.
That's the thing. I just don't think they can afford it. I think that they would have to decide, okay, if we're going to do that, then we're going to either let Toffoli go, Tanev go, or trade Brock Besser.
Okay.
I mean, would you do that and sign Krug?
I would probably let Pearson go if I could get rid of him.
Nah, he's not. He doesn't count enough money. See, it's either you're going to have to sign Toffoli, so that money's got to go somewhere, or to a defenseman. Or if you bring it to Foley, then you know you can't afford Besser or you can't afford Tanev, but you can't do it all. They're just not. They don't have enough money to do it all.
My opinion, honestly, as much as I like Toffoli, I think you need help on the blue line more
Okay.
than you need Tyler Toffoli.
And I'm all
That's
right
my
with
opinion.
that. If they could find a defenseman that they feel will be around for that next wave of young defensemen besides Julevi to come up, I'm okay with that. Because look, they're ahead at 2 years after what they just did. They shouldn't have been one game away from the Final Four. So that was something that should have happened in 2022. So they could still take their time. They don't have to worry about signing old guys. But I agree, one guy, that's it. And then you make sure you have enough money to re-sign Bezer and obviously Pedersen, and you wait for the young wave of defensemen to come up. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see what they do. All right, so let's break down the Final Four now. And as far as the odds, again, Tampa and Vegas are plus 150 to win the Cup. Islanders are 5-1. Dallas is 6-1. The way my futures go, I'm pretty okay with it because even though I'm not going to make a whole lot of money if Vegas holds on to win the Cup, that's the only team I could wager on the way things worked out. So that's what I'm going to put all my money on so I can make about $4 or $5 grand if Vegas wins the Cup. If they don't, I lose out big. As for you, you're in a pretty good situation because you're right now, the amount of money you've already invested is even with the amount of money that you can make back on Vegas. You are about 13,000 in the hole on Tampa and 18,000 in the hole on Dallas. And again, Dallas being 6-1, that is something that at least should help you out. You won't have to put a whole lot of money on them to get them to come up and maybe help you out with a hedge wager. But let's start with the West. Dallas, Vegas. Dallas doesn't have the luxury of playing a team like Calgary or a banged up Colorado team with a crappy goalie. Vegas is just a better hockey team. I think they survived their tough series. They're a series that they went to the brink, that they probably felt they survived. They showed a lot of character in doing so. They almost lost back-to-back playoff series where they were up 3-1. That would have been a disaster. So I think they got to be feeling really good about themselves. And I say they probably beat Dallas in 6.
I agree. So let's talk it from the Dallas side, right? Dallas, to a certain extent, is playing with house money. Look, I think we all think that if Colorado had been healthy, Colorado would advance, right? And then you get a guy in Joel Kavinka who hadn't scored a goal all playoffs. Gets in for Andrew Cogliano, who almost never misses a game at all. Guy gets the tying goal 10 seconds after Colorado took the lead with under 4 minutes to go. And then he gets the game win overtime to complete the hat trick. I mean, that's just a Disney-esque type of story and a great story nonetheless. Like Dallas, Alexander Radulov had a really good series, in my opinion. Hudobin was fine. I don't think it was particularly great. We know how good Miro Heiskanen is. I think he's well surpassed John Klingberg on that blue line. They're getting production and support from other guys. But you look at Vegas overall, top to bottom, they should be a better team. Now, good. Dallas clearly has a puncher's chance, right? We didn't think they had the ability to score, right? And they proved offensively they were much better than they were thought they were going to be. Defensively, I just don't know if they're going to be able to stay with Vegas. I'm actually going to go with Vegas in either 5 or 6 also in this series. Look, Dallas is playing with house money. Would it shock me if they made a run and won? No. I just think overall Vegas is a better team. Both teams are coming off of game sevens, right? So neither one of
Yeah.
them have additional rest than the other team.
Yeah.
So they're both dealing with the same kind of issues in terms of lack of rest and moving right to the next round, which starts tonight on 8 o'clock on NBC. So I just think that Vegas in general is a better team top to bottom overall. I think they may have too much firepower for Dallas to be able to keep up with in this series.
All right. In the East, you have the Islanders, and boy, Barry Trotz has done it again. I'm a Washington fan, and I'm just shaking my head that they let him go. I don't get it.
So's every other Washington fan, especially after they got rid of their coach.
Well, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, shows you how much a team needs coaches, right? What's a coach? What's the value of a coach? Anyway, Islanders and Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay was clearly the best team in hockey last year, and then they got dispatched, swept by little Columbus, and John Cooper's coaching status is probably on the line early in this postseason, but they have survived and they have won every overtime game. That's a scary thing to face a team that is doing that, because maybe that's just their year, especially after last year was supposed to be their year. I've seen this played. I mean, for 40 years covering sports, I have seen this played over and over and over again when a team was supposed to win the year before, and then people find, I'm not going to, and then that's the next year that they go ahead and do it. So I like Tampa to beat the Islanders. It may go 7. I don't think Islanders are going to make this easy for Tampa at all. Matter of fact, I think this will go 7.
So I think Tomas Greiss will end up starting in net for the Islanders. You have to roll with the hot hand after game 7. Regardless of who plays net, right? You know you're going to get solid defense in front of them. We said before, the style of play they played in the first round, the style of play they played against Philly, same style of play you're going to see here. They're going to try to force Tampa wide. Don't let them get to the middle. Tighten up defensively, clog the neutral zone, and then they're a counterattack team. That's what the Islanders do. Any turnover, I mean, the stat I heard yesterday, I think it was about 10 minutes to go in the game. I was listening to the Flyers broadcast. The Flyers had 16 giveaways and 11 shots on net. Clearly not the way to win a game, right? So that's what the Islanders do. They force you into turnovers and they counterattack. And you see how good Mark Barzal is. You see what you've gotten out of Anthony Bouvalier. You see Bailey and Lee. You see the fourth line, which is clearly a difference maker, right? We talked about the value of a fourth line. Well, Islanders have a fourth line that has an identity that basically just checks you like crazy, is physical, grinds out shifts and cycles the puck and creates scoring opportunities. And Matt Martin has had a couple of big goals along with Casey Zizekas and Kunak, whoever's on that line. Defensively, you have Leddy, who's played pretty well for them. I mean, Pelech and Pulak have been a great first pair. But on the flip side, we've seen how good Victor Hedman is. Ryan McDonough is now healthy. Nikita Kucherov was questionable. He's now healthy. The extra days off gives them time to rest and be fresh. The one big question mark is, will we see Steve Stamkos in this playoff? Steve Stamkos has missed. We don't know exactly what the injury is, but the rumor was originally last round he was getting closer. But we have no idea whether or not if he's going to play or not. If he does, my view is he'll likely be sheltered. He'll see maybe some third line minutes. He'll see some power play time. I don't think they're going to go full force with him if he is back. But I do think that Tampa Islanders is one of those puncher, counter puncher. Tampa's going to try to set the speed, going to try to set the pace. The Islanders are going to try to create turnovers off that to counterattack and take advantage. What they are seeing, though, is Vasilevsky has shown in the first 2 rounds that he's not the goalie that lost in the round 1 last year to Columbus. He's a much different goaltender. I do think Tampa gets by the Islanders. I'm going to take Tampa in 6 in this series.
All right. So we both have Tampa and Vegas in the final. Which way are you going? Is it one of those things where you need to definitely see what happens in the next round?
I want to see what happens. I want to see if there's any injuries. I want to see if Stamkos comes back. I want to see if Vegas has anybody out right. Ryan Reeves misses tonight's game because of a 1-game suspension from Game 7. That hurts them a little bit. But I'm curious to see if there's any injuries or anybody who's basically hobbled going into the next round who's no going to be out, because that could change the landscape in terms of the next round. On paper right now, I'm going to take Tampa in like 6 or 7 in that series, but I'm going to reserve right to change my pick.
Okay, sounds good. That means that does that mean that you're going to go ahead and start investing some more money on Tampa in your futures then?
I will probably put another 5K or so on Tampa.
You might have to do more than that, but we'll see. All right. Rotowire.com. What's going on over there with you? What you doing?
Most of my stuff, honestly, is really baseball related now. Hockey, we're doing some, quick playoff previews in terms of each round. We did that a lot in the first round. That's died down a little bit. The daily fantasy side is doing some projections in terms of guys to grab in each one of these games, but nothing really holistically in terms of the overall playoff predictions right now.
And what's okay? The season ends in a couple of weeks. What
Right?
happens right after that?
Draft is about, I think, like a week. A season's supposed to end, I think, like October 8th. And I think we get the draft right afterwards, about a week later, and then we go right into free agency, I
October
think, a week or
8th.
so after that.
Really? It's
Yeah,
going to
I think it's
last a whole
October 8th
month?
could be the last game. I think that was the projection for the last game originally. I think it was, or maybe it was the first week of October
Okay.
was a projection if everything went 7 games.
Okay.
And then the next series went 7 games. That would be the last end date where the series could end, right? We're at September 6th now, right? If you think about every other day, right? You go 6, 8, 10, 12 would be 5 games, 14, 16, right? And then you potentially start the next series on the 20th and go another 2 rounds. You're looking like October 2nd or October 3rd or 4th potentially is the last end date if each series went 7 rounds.
I mean, isn't it
7 games, I mean.
isn't it wouldn't it have been more isn't game 7 of a quarterfinal more important than I don't know, game 2 or game 3 of a semifinal?
Well, I
Why
think they
couldn't
want
you
to, I
have
think don't
given the
forget.
day off so in that game 7 and then if you wanted to catch up in the semifinals early in the round in the
Well, I think they
series?
didn't want to. I think they didn't want to impact it, and also don't forget the teams from Toronto had to travel to Edmonton for the playoff for the next round.
And
Also,
what was
so
that
everybody's in
about?
Edmonton now. That's where they decided to do the finals. That's where they did the conference finals and the finals. So I think part of it also is, if I remember correctly, families should be able to start joining the players in the bubble now. Also, now that they're in the conference finals, I know definitely for the Stanley Cup. I'm pretty sure for the conference finals. So I think part of that was to get there established. And clearly, holiday weekend, they want to have games on NBC tonight and tomorrow.
Okay. And even though things are progressing 100 times better than they were a couple of months ago when the plans came out with COVID, no idea of letting in a couple thousand people for the finals.
As of right now, I have not heard really anything that that's going to be the plan.
Just glad I named my team hoisting the Stanley Cup. All right, so we will talk hockey again, hopefully sometime soon. And again, the draft comes out right after the season ends, so we definitely will talk about that. It's all about your Rangers and the celebration of your superstar, your next superstar. By the way, where does that player? Is he already going to be the best player in your organization?
No, Artemi Panarin's the best player in the organization right now. So is Mika Zibanejad. So Lafreniere will probably be their number one overall prospect, even though the Rangers have a
What
deep
I'm saying is
prospect
that
pool.
so could he be better than Panarin?
Yeah, we'll have to see that. I'm not going to put that moniker on him yet. I think it's unfair to give that to him. Could he develop into be better than Panarin? Absolutely.
Okay.
But that's definitely a little while away.
All right. And then the what? What's right after the draft? Free agency?
Free agencies, I think, like a week or so later is when free agency starts.
Okay. So we'll have that big day of no, that's trade day, but we'll have what is it? It's still a big day in free agency for hockey in the
Yeah, I mean, I have
offseason.
to check the calendar in terms of what date is, right? It's what
It's in October,
it'll be
right?
July, and October. Let's put it that way. It'll be July 1st and October.
July 1st and October. Okay. And then when does the season start?
As of now, tentatively, it's scheduled to start the beginning of December. Would it shock me if it's moved back? Not at all. I had originally postulated that the Winter Classic would be the first day of the season.
Yeah.
But right
That sure
now,
would be smart, wouldn't it?
as of because again, it'll be a good way to start. I think as of now it's December, but I would not be shocked in the slightest. Would actually expect that date gets moved back a little bit.
Yeah, because if they're going to start the season in December, then that means everybody's gonna. Well, you could tell, you can still limit the amount of fans at the arenas, but then it's just a traveling deal, just like
Correct.
baseball and the NFL. All right,
Right, and part of it depends also, right, if we have a vaccine and if arenas can open by then or not, and how they would do the seating. Nothing, all that still is very much up in the air as we sit here on September
yeah,
6th.
and it's also winter time, middle of the winter, and that's when you get colds and flu season and all that other
Correct.
stuff. So, all right.
Yep.
The good thing is that when at least for America, but we know how much it dictates Canada, is that the election will be over, and depending on which way it go, on one hand, it could completely open up everything again, and the other hand, it could completely shut everything down again. So we'll see. That's coming up later on, but we have a lot of good stuff to talk about with. Especially once the season is over, and that's going to be a lot of fun for 26 fans fan bases that are not in the Final Four. Is there 30 teams in hockey?
31, 32 starting Seattle.
31
in
now.
So
26, 27 teams then that get the opportunity of wishing on the draft and free agency. All right, Jan, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again real soon, including, of course, our Jet coverage. We'll talk to you right after the Jets and the Bills a week from Sunday.
Sounds good.